Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of Alien Earth, Episode 1, Neverland, and Episode 2, Mr. October. This new series on FX explores the wonders and horrors of the world of Weyland Yutani and the somehow even more evil Prodigy Corporation, 2 years before the events of the 1979 Alien on the Nostromo. So in this video, I'm going to break down the deeper themes of this show, the connections to the Alien series, why Ice Age is in this, and details you might have missed from these first 2 episodes of Alien Earth on FX and Hulu. From creator Noah Hawley, the man behind Fargo and Legion. And you may have noticed I'm wearing this very cool Weyland Yutani shirt. It's like my new favorite item from our merch store, nerdriot.shop, where you can grab all kinds of great gift options, and it's the best way to support what we're doing here at New Rockstars. All right, let's start with episode 1, Neverland. It opens with FX Presents, in left swiping green text, the same typeface and movement as the communication with Mother on the Nostromo in the 1979 Alien film and on the Maginot in this series. So right away, we're just getting the sense that all the humans we're going to meet on the series are very expendable. More text explains how the future race for immortality comes in 3 guises and defines the 3 types of tech-enhanced humanity we're going to see on this series. Cyborgs, that's humans augmented with parts. Synths, that's AI beings like Ash, Bishop, David, and now Kirsch, played by Timothy Oliphant. And a new form introduced on this series, hybrids, which are synth bodies with downloaded human consciousnesses, something that is happening off the books currently. And these words, race for immortality, get explored more fully in episode 2 by Boy Cavalier, and it's not a race between human corporations like Prodigy and Weyland Yutani, it turns out, but rather a race between humanity and the AI we've already created. And I like the term guises here, as it suggests that all 3 of these things are really simulacra of immortality rather than true godly immortality itself. It's an artificial immortality that we're only able to achieve through sacrificing parts of our humanity. The letters of Alien Earth all appear one stroke at a time, recalling the way the letters of ALIEN assemble in the opening moments of the 1979 film. We see close-ups of a sleeping xenomorph as insert flashes of it awake and hunting flicker in, as if this thing is dreaming of the feeding it will soon be doing. We see inserts of a facehugger extending its central orifice, and it looks especially mucousy, and for the first time, am I seeing some hair follicles? Yuck! But it makes sense. It could be how it further latches in our throats. The Weyland Yutani research vessel, the USCSS Maginot, passes Saturn. This name comes from the Maginot Line, named after French Minister of War André Maginot, a line of concrete fortifications, obstacles, and weapons installations built by France in the 1930s to try to deter an invasion by Nazi Germany, but this resulted in Germany invading through countries like the Netherlands and Belgium during World War II. The Maginot Line has since become a metaphor for expensive efforts that offer a false sense of security. This is exactly what the heads of these human companies are doing, pouring money into conquering death while bringing death into that safety bubble through a route that they didn't foresee. We hear the music of Strange Brew, a 1967 Cream song with the lyrics, "Strange Brew, kill what's inside of you," lyrics that refer to drugs and a woman, but also a fitting set of words for the hunter species that would gestate inside of its prey. These opening shots inside the Maginot are nearly shot for shot Ridley Scott's opening shots on the Nostromo in the 1979 film. We see new mission directives reflected on the helmet of an empty spacesuit. We see the interior of the Mother Room looking just like it did in Ron Cobb's production design of the interior of the Nostromo. We see the cryopods lazily opening. And anytime we're on the Maginot in these opening episodes, you can see various sightings of what's called semiotic standard above every passageway. This is the signage invented by Ron Cobb for the 79 film to label what's on the other side of that passageway. And this production design has since been adopted by several other sci-fi films and television shows because, yeah, it's so goddamn cool and practical. We are in the year 2120, 2 years before the events of the 1979 Alien film, and we learn that the length of this mission was 65 years, which means that Weyland Yutani sent out this craft in the year 2055, and Weyland Yutani turns out has been exploring life forms and came across xenomorphs decades before even Ridley Scott's prequel Prometheus was set. Zaverny is played by Richa Morjani, who played Indira on season 5 of Noah Hawley's Fargo. Raheem lights up a cigarette, which is another Robert Altman-esque world detail exhibited by characters on the Nostromo, even though in reality you would never smoke on a spacecraft where the balance of breathable oxygen is a very carefully calculated thing. But whatever, it just makes these people look like salt of the earth. They sit around the same exact kind of table that the Nostromo crew ate at in their mess bay, where, you know, Kane suffered his fate. So we're all super paranoid when Raheem and Petrovich argue over the food that they're eating here. And yes, they're all wearing the same kind of white jumpsuits with company patches that we saw worn by the Nostromo crew. There is a synth on board aboard this ship Mr. Tang, who apparently watches them as they sleep. But unlike the Nostromo crew with Ash, this crew knows that Tang is a synth, which suggests that Weyland Yutani will tell the research vessels that they're working with synths, maybe because there's more science officers on board that crew, but they don't tell the mineral refinery truckers. And we meet Morrow, the security officer on the ship, who is a cyborg. And the fact that he has augmentations makes him more of an Ash personality who is willing to put the company objectives over the safety of his fellow crewmates. These guys use cards to explain the 5 corporations that own everything, Weyland Yutani, whom they work for, and we learn that Weyland Yutani in 2120 controls North and South America, as well as the planets of Mars and Saturn. And because Weyland Yutani owns Saturn and they just passed Saturn, that probably explains why their comms were recently cut off. We learn another company, Dynamic, controls the moon. Prodigy we will meet very soon, and the other 2 companies on that list are Threshold and Lynch. I really love the shot where they say 4 companies control the world, but when Malachite corrects to say 5, the new one having emerged in the past 10 years during their mission, we cut back to the same table where now suddenly Boy Cavalier is sitting at the end of the table with his feet up on it. We learn that Boy Cavalier is the youngest trillionaire ever. Trillion might have been chosen because, while it is an absurdly large amount of wealth for one person to own, recently tech companies like Nvidia and Microsoft got trillion-dollar valuations due in part to their expansions into AI. Chibuzo listens to Nina Simone's Please Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood as she examines the 5 specimens this crew was assigned to bring back to Earth. Of course, the xenomorph, currently in just a face-hugger form. Another creature called a T. ocellus, which mimics the eyeball of its prey while burrowing inside of it. We'll see more of that in episode 2. This mysterious plant pod that we're still getting to know. And then this kind of leech tick that sucks blood from the jugular vein and bloats as a result. And then a flying insect that still seems caged that I assume we'll meet in episode 3 or beyond. As they all go into cryosleep, we see flashes of the madness that will soon take over the Maginot. One crew member being stalked by an adult xenomorph, Chibuzo's corpse as it is found later in episode 2, and then the shot of Tang eerily screaming. Why would Tang scream? Now we fly through the clouds to Prodigy's Neverland Island. Even this approach is meant to evoke Peter Pan's flight into Neverland through the clouds in J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan play and the various adaptations, including the Disney film. This patient, Marcy, chats with this synth, Hirsch, about whether to kill a scorpion, which feels like a key parable, reminding us of the scorpion and the tortoise. Like, can you trust a scorpion not to sting you, to pierce your shell? Should all more powerful beings in the food chain kill just because we can, just to keep ourselves from being injured? Or is it only justified when we're feeding? It's interesting to rewatch this scene and compare it to the later conversation between Kirsch and Marcy's Wendy form. Marcy is taken by Dame Sylvia, and they pass this worker in this hazmat suit spraying a damaged door. We see this door again in episode 2. Clearly a mystery box that this series is setting up. What's behind that door? Could it be some other piece of proprietary fauna discovered by Weyland Yutani or Prodigy? Could it be a Yautja predator? We know everything, and this franchise is headed to another Alien vs. Predator crossover. Arthur, Dame Sylvia's husband, has this interesting exchange with his wife that you can only make out through closed captioning.
I had the weirdest dream last night. We had a baby. It was a pig.
I had a pig when I was a girl. It was cute. And it was 300 pounds.
So Arthur wants to have kids, but we find out later he has a low sperm count. Sperm.
Sperm's funny word.
But Dame Sylvia says that she prefers his experimental kids with adult synth bodies who, unlike her pigs she grew up with, will never grow. Boy Cavalier enters.
Welcome in. Mushy mushy.
Yes, he gives the German greeting and a Japanese greeting. Yutani is a Japanese company. Weyland has been established as a British company, but maybe Dynamic or Lynch or Threshold could be German. But either way, a character leading with Willkommen reminds us of the opening lyrics of Cabaret. Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome. Boy compares her to Neil Armstrong as she will be the first to undergo this historic procedure. The fact that he uses a milestone of space exploration to frame a giant leap in earthbound AI and longevity tells you Cavalier's priorities. Like the answers Weyland Yutani seeks from the stars, Prodigy thinks they found from within. Cavalier plays on the ceiling footage from Disney's 1953 Peter Pan, which along with the 2012 film Ice Age Continental Drift and FX series like this one all share the parent company of Disney. I talked to Noah Hawley about these references. The usage of Peter Pan, both this Disney adaptation and the original J.M. Barrie 1904 stage play and the 1911 novel Peter and Wendy, all form a major extended metaphor of this show. Boy Cavalier fashions himself as the Peter Pan of this Neverland, the boy who doesn't want to grow up, who's even called Boy, probably as a reference to the way Wendy greets Peter as, "Hello, boy." He wants to find a way to stave off death for everyone. He gathers a group of lost boys, and Marcy and the other hybrids all adopt the names of Wendy and other lost boys, and technically Smee is a member of Captain Hook's crew, but whatever. Noah Hawley has compared this to the way tech companies of our world are all run by boy kings who are overly focused on the right now and not very much on the future, the way grown-ups really should be focused on the future. And so Hawley has said this series is in some ways a search for the grown-ups. Noah also said there's something dark about Peter Pan and Barry's original text and the way he stymies the maturation of the lost boys and then kind of disposes of them when they grow up. To flee death this aggressively and relentlessly chase immortality, this series poses is to deny ourselves the wisdom of what makes life truly valuable. Right as Marcy and Dame Sylvia establish this procedure is a secret that she can't even tell her brother about, we cut to this wide shot where the ceiling footage in this moment shows Wendy's older younger brother, John, hanging from an umbrella. This is followed by Michael dropping the teddy bear, which is where the Prodigy company gets its logo. Dame Sylvia gives Marcy an orange flower to hold, making her body look like a corpse as it lies beside her new synth form. Marcy names her new form Wendy, and she holds her hand, which is how the kids fly off to Neverland together. During this transition, we hear the song Accentuate the Positive, which is a 1944 Arlen and Mercer song that won an Oscar for its use in Here Comes the Waves. It includes the lyrics, "Don't mess with Mr. In-Between," which reflects the in-between stage of humanity and consciousness Wendy currently occupies now. During this and throughout these first two episodes, we flash back to Marcy's childhood with her brother Joe and their father, who's played as a cameo by Noah Hawley himself. Wendy enjoys her new indestructible body, able to leap off a high cliff without taking damage, and running at super speed. It looks like they did a Texas switch here, where the camera whip pans to show Sidney Chandler already having sprinted down the beach. Robert Zemeckis used a similar shot in Forrest Gump when the truck chases Forrest as he makes a turn and is suddenly halfway down that path. Dame Sylvia asks,
Wendy, darling.
Ha! She means darling as a term of endearment, but it's also a play on Wendy's full name in the original text, Wendy Darling. Wendy says her emotions are quiet now, and Sylvia and Kirsch explain how the hybrid bodies are modded with hormones to try to ease these children into adult bodies, which Kirsch pushes back against. As a synth, he doesn't really see the point in trying to mimic humanity on this level, and wants hybrids to define themselves as a new stage of evolution. So we're getting into some Ship of Theseus metaphysics here, and whether the emotional trauma we incur over our adult lives makes us more fit or just burden us. Like, are we stronger and more fearless as youth minds? Human beings, after all, are not evolved to live 70 years. Our peak reproductive period is ages 12 through 30. In 1900, the average global lifespan was just 32 years. In 2023, advances in medicine extended that to 73 years, which, hey, is great. Hey, these meat sacks were only designed to live long enough to help our offspring reach sexual maturity, and then we're supposed to move on. I'm not saying what's right here, I'm just saying this is probably some of the math Kirsch has done. The way Wendy sits on a stump and then lifts the other kids, soon to become Lost Boys hybrids, is pretty coded to be Wendy and Peter Pan, you know, helping the other kids find their happy thoughts so they can lift off the ground. Wendy repeats a procedure that Sylvia and Boyd did for her. We get this really cool continuous shot that smoothly conjoins each of the kids' transitions from Slightly to Smee to Nibs to Toodles to Curly, all in one shot, and they even each have different flowers. So they used, I presume, a series of Texas switches, swapping in new actors on the gurney as soon as the camera does a pass over them, and they probably shot all this very slowly and had the characters not moving as they were reacting to the bodies on the gurney so that they could speed it up later. Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. If you ever find yourself looking around and thinking, I thought I'd be further along by now, and when reality doesn't match that picture, it's easy to feel like you've fallen behind. The truth is, it's completely normal to feel frustrated with where you are. Everyone wants something more, and while it's okay to sit with those feelings, sometimes they start to weigh you down or get in the way of moving forward. I know I've certainly felt that way. When I moved to Los Angeles, I thought by 5 years I will have gotten a job on a movie or on a TV show where I'm in complete creative control of that. And I thought that that was unrealistic until I looked around and I saw some friends who did kind of have that kind of career agency. And I thought, damn, what did I do wrong? Or why am I not good enough? And then I realized maybe I have enough. And one thing therapy really helped me with is the fact that everyone, no matter how successful they are, is feeling that same kind of anxiety. That anxiety comes from a place that is not based on your external circumstances so much, but from someplace else. And that's why I'm just really grateful for therapy, and why BetterHelp is a sponsor of today's video. They make it easy to talk to someone who can help you work through those feelings and find a way forward. A good therapist helps you see that you're not behind in life, you're simply just on your own unique timeline. They help you recognize that your identity isn't fixed by some arbitrary deadline, but by constantly evolving as you grow. This perspective shift alone can be so beneficial. BetterHelp makes starting therapy easy. Just head to betterhelp.com/newrockstars, fill out a questionnaire, and you will match with a therapist in as little as a couple days. With over 7,000 reviews and a 4.5 rating on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a platform you can trust. Click the link in the description, scan the QR code, or go to betterhelp.com/newrockstars and get 10% off your first month of therapy. While the kids' entry point to Peter Pan was the Disney version, Boy reads almost as a bedtime story the much darker J.M. Barrie text, which includes this very creepy passage. Mrs. Darling first heard of Peter when she was tidying up her children's minds. It is the nightly custom of every good mother, after her children are asleep, to rummage in their minds and put things straight. When you wake in the morning, the naughtiness and evil passions with which you went to bed have been folded up small and placed at the bottom of your mind. At the top, beautifully aired, are spread out your prettier thoughts, ready for you to put on. In the days at home, the Neverland had always begun to look a little dark and threatening by bedtime. Then unexplored patches arose and it spread. Black shadows moved about in them. The roar of the beasts of prey was quite different now. Above all, you lost a certainty that you would win. Boy Cavalier reading this, especially over the shots of the scorpion and the shaved hair of the sick kids' corpses washing down the drain, their faces zipped up in body bags, the wall decor of the three monkeys and the hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil pose. It's also sinister to revisit this legend we grew up with, remembering as sweet, and now reframing it with Victorian values of like mothers snooping through their kids' minds to bury the evil thoughts and then drag up the prettier thoughts, which is like exactly what Boy Cavalier is trying to do to control the minds of children. And this whole idea that when they're at home, the magic of the wild looks more like a terrifying nightmare through the lens of that bubble. So we revisit the doomed Maginot. Flashes show us several of the specimens now attacking the crew, and in one of these flashes we see Chibouzo next to another crew person with an open chest, suggesting that she tried to help with a chest burster but is now traumatized before something else will get to her. Morrow chats with Mother. His keypad has the same symbols that were on the buttons in the 1979 film. Noah Hawley uses a split focus to show poor Zaverny on the outside pounding on the window trying to get away from an approaching xenomorph. We only see the xenomorph in flashes of light as it attacks Zaverny, but even this much is more of its body than Ridley Scott showed us in the 1979 film, and we see how it hunches lower to the ground in more of a wolf-like posture. Morrow calmly hums as Zaverny dies, and as the xenomorph smashes in, he lowers into the impact pod, getting a bit of drool on his head as the Maginot crashes through the arrival gate by the moon. And I like how there's no sound in exterior space because, you know, in space no one can hear you scream, but we do get sound and a great interior shot from the station showing the comparative size of the workers. On to New Siam, a Prodigy company city. Siam was the historical name of Thailand, where much of the series was actually shot. So it suggests that Prodigy might be controlling much of Southeast Asia. You can see billboards around the skyscrapers with the slogan, "Potential Realized." We meet Joe, aka Hermit. His name is Joe Hermit, a Prodigy medic played by Alex Lothar, who I got to interview, as he travels home and listens to a baseball game. It suggested that his name, Joe, came from Joe DiMaggio. Wendy watches him through Prodigy CCTV footage that she's able to touch and move on her screens, an ability that we learned in episode 2 is not a kind of power her designers realized she had. Wendy keeps an old photo of Joe and their father, who now it's an eye patch. In episode 2, we learn that the dad was a survivor of something, but we don't learn yet. But in flashbacks, he does drink and play the guitar. I'm wondering if he was a survivor of some Weyland Yutani mission. Joe watches the 2012 film Ice Age Continental Drift, the fourth Ice Age film, watching the reverse projection on the curtain watched by the Thai family he shares his flat with. So this is a film Joe and Marcy watched as kids. I pitched to Noah Hawley a theory that these kids watched this random forquel 100 years in the future due to perhaps AI rendering the production of new Hollywood IP to be obsolete. And Noah did not really seem that interested in that question, but I think there definitely is something to the nostalgia many of these characters share, because nostalgia is a core part of being a human that AI and the proponents of AI cannot really understand. Hermit and his Prodigy military squad see the Maginot crash into a New Siam high-rise, and they rush to the scene. They carry pulse rifles that look like derivations of the general designs of the M42A pulse rifles used by the Colonial Marines in 1986's Aliens. They're not exactly the same, but they do display the rounds remaining in similar red numbers, and they emit the same burst sound effect when they fire. Hermit switches into triage mode, clearly having served in active combat, as he's unfazed by debris crushing a victim feet away from him. As they search for the lower floors, he uses pieces of reflective tape to, I suppose, triage DOA victims. They find the Maginot, which is blanketed by a waterfall of sparks that seem to be raining throughout the stairwell that they'll have to jump across in episode 2. And to extend this Peter Pan extended metaphor even further, you might be able to see this as like a veil of pixie dust that separates the terrestrial world that we know from the extraterrestrial wild that we're being thrust into. Maybe that's reaching, but I do just love the visual and how it displays in the mirror behind Alex Lothar as he reacts to it. Back in the mother room, we see Maginot on a red screen in the same Nostromo text that we saw at the beginning of the 1979 film, also in the opening minutes of Alien Romulus. Morrow cuts out of the impact pod and alerts Weyland Yutani that the specimens are loose. Boy's assistant, Adam Ines, briefs him that the new Siam residents were at the Founders Day festival, Founders, suggesting that Boy Cavalier might have had another founder of Prodigy. Not sure if that other founder is Dame Sylvia or some other figure that we don't know yet. Boy orders to triage by income bracket, which is so shitty, but not that surprising considering Prodigy organizes this company town as an oligarchy where the wealthy class is probably more essential to his agenda. Boy is impressed with Wendy's human impulse to save her brother and chooses to nurture that as a stress test on the Lost Boys. He chucks the ball he's often seen fiddling with, and she snap catches it like Gina Davis in A League of Their Own. Wendy arms herself with her stuffed walrus that she received earlier and a blade from her paper slicer. The Lost Boys childishly speculate on ways they could possibly die, and while cancer is now really out of the question, there are more childish theories of getting mauled by things like hippos, essentially being food, is now actually a more plausible death for at least the human characters on this show. Hoyt and Anant find the science bay where one of those leech ticks silks down in their clothes. Morrow catches them, and we're now in kind of a conflict of corporate piracy. Like, we have reps from Prodigy tried to plunder the loot of Weyland Yutani, so Morrow deals with them the way pirates deal with each other, cuffing them to like a mast. Meanwhile, Hermit, Siberian, and Rashidi move into the sleep bay, and we hear the echoing horns composed for the first Alien film. We actually heard these horns earlier as Mr. Tang stood over these same beds. It looks like some of the sleepers in these pods had their stomachs gored out, suggesting they must have ingested a facehugger before they went in. Hermit supposes it's been a week, and I love this shot. Overhead, some xenomorph anatomy moves in the vent. These first 2 episodes are just so good about hiding xenomorphs and parts of xenomorphs in plain sight. The leech tick crawls out of Hoyt's shirt and then munches into his jugular, fattening itself on blood and then just lopping off drunk. In the same shot, a second one now crawls onto Anant's helmet to repeat this process. Kirsch ends episode 1 with a fascinating monologue about how to be an animal is to be essentially food. Remember how earlier Wendy said she missed eating? And here Kirsch says that even when mankind advanced with technology, they just told themselves they weren't food anymore. But the reality is there's always something bigger or smaller that would eat us to survive. And death comes for humans in some form or another. The idea being that these things in synth bodies should feel lucky to be removed from that food chain. But Wendy, still having a human child's mind, throws that opening parable about the scorpion back in Kirsch's face, expressing this immature conviction that she could always protect her brother. Episode 2, Mr. October, opens with Siberian, Rashidi, and Hermit moving down the engineering level of the Maginot after this crashed vessel falls deeper into the lower levels of the building. Hermit senses something stalking them and quickly turns around to peer into the darkness, and if you look closely in that inky darkness, you can see something shifting in the dark just before we cut back to Hermit. And considering we see this xenomorph passing the frame after he turns away, that means, yeah, that was a xenomorph lurking just out of sight, and it's so creepy. So they find the medic bay where Chibuzzo had just stitched up the other patient, presumably one who had had the face hugger and chest burster implant in his GI tract, but Chibuzzo died via suffocation, probably not the leech ticks, even though she looks like she's been sucked dry by a leech tick. Hermit says there was a toxin based off of her blue lips, so maybe it was that plant-looking pod thing that actually got to her, because the ticks and the TSLs don't seem to operate using any kind of poison or toxin. Hermit says the emergency code of 1562 means foreign bodies.
What do you mean foreign? Alien.
Ah, he said the thing! And since these opening minutes gets us so accustomed to the greasy ship machinery and dangling cables, as was the case in the 1979 film, a xenomorph is hidden in plain sight again. Boy Cavalier and Dame Sylvia have this fascinating debate about the value of teaching kids to be better humans. Boy views his mission is to explode human potential, aka disrupt in tech bro terms. Basically ruin it, because you think you make everything better by ruining it. In his case, plugging a human consciousness into a synth machine so that it would not be bound by any kind of human constraints anymore, and just seeing what comes out of that. He considers himself the smartest human and wants to upscale human intelligence to a level it's never been before.
I want to talk to somebody smarter than me.
And I like how he says all this while munching an apple. Yes, the archetypal forbidden fruit, also the fruit that famously struck Isaac Newton's head, and the poison fruit that Alan Turing used to end everything for him, and the fruit that Steve Jobs used as his company logo. So obviously tech bros are just like obsessed with apples. Siberian and Rashidi leap across the stairwell, and before Hermit can follow suit, drool oozes down on his shoulder, and from the darkness above, the xenomorph doesn't even try to hide itself anymore. Its metallic jaws emerging from the void. The fact that this happens slowly is just really creepy, because it confirms to Hermit that moving shadow that he saw before was definitely this same hunter toying with them back there. Hermit leaps across, followed by the xenomorph. He lands hard on a level down and sprints to an elevator, just barely evading this hunter. In just these few seconds, Hermit can ascertain the thing chasing him is 8 feet tall and armored. The conversation with Siberian on the roof in episode 1 about Hermit's previous meeting with the Prodigy robot is flashed back to here. On glass, we see a sign reading no mask, no goggles, no sunglasses, no helmet, because these facial scanners need to be able to read the human's face. Hermit trying to get out of his contract is similar to a scene at the beginning of Alien Romulus. In that case, it was with Weyland Yutani. In this case, the contract is with Prodigy, and here it ends up in a similar rejection. Hermit wants to go to Skull Medical School on Mars to honor the dying wish of his father to go to medical school.
Where is the last surviving? It's a long story.
On yesterday's episode of The Break Room, we touched on the theory that Prodigy may have even targeted the whole Hermit family after some kind of targeted radiation leak that ended up giving Marcy the cancer she had, maybe to prime her as a candidate for this procedure. Joe quotes the famous line from Ice Age Continental Drift.
Have it hard. Or face my fury.
Oh boy. Yes, that was Sid the Sloth from Ice Age, superimposed next to Sydney Chandler. Yeah, Kyle Chandler's daughter. This is a shot in an Alien production. But look, guys, this is a child mind recalling a childhood memory and using that to connect with her brother through this robot lens.
Space your furry what?
So while Prodigy gave Wendy access to their servers to monitor her behavior, they didn't know she'd also have the ability to rewrite the code of whatever's connected to those servers. It's kind of a god power if you ask me. But yes, it was Wendy who made this robot deny Joe's request to go to Mars, so she feels guilt that he was on Earth when the crash happened. Now we get another shot of the Prodigy hazmat suit guy spraying the door. Yeah, you definitely hear an animal growling on the other side of that door. And maybe there's something to the fact that all the medical gowns that the kids wear all have different like jungle animals on them. Maybe they're experimenting on rhinos or hippos or lions or whatever. Gina pitched the theory on Break Room that this guy could be spraying the door to keep whatever's on the other side of the door cold and in some kind of cryogenic state. Boy Cavalier gets a call from Yutani, who is now the CEO of the overall corporation. I'm wondering if this is after Peter Weyland has died as of the events of the Prometheus film. She says she wants to send in a team to recover Weyland Yutani's property from the wreckage, but I have to imagine that Yutani is smart enough to know that her boy genius corporate rival would never grant her that access. So I think there might be an ulterior motive, because why would this ship aim for a city? I think Weyland Yutani directed the mother of the Maginot to steer the ship into New Siam as some kind of intentional corporate sabotage, maybe part of a long game to eventually acquire the whole Prodigy company, or at least to stop them from advancing. Kirsch tells the hybrids,
Cheers for animals. You are not animals.
Again, we see how he resists upping hormones like adrenaline into the hybrids because as sturdier beings, they wouldn't really need the same kind of fight or flight reflex. They find this oozing pod that at first looks like a plant, but they later determine it's fauna, posing as flora. They find the leech tick bloated to an insane degree. Then something so gross we can't really show it here on YouTube, but the poor cat of the Maginot ship that FX actually featured in a March promo, it has been infected by the Teocellus, mimicking the cat's eye as it has burrowed into the cat's skull and eats its brain. Then, after leaving the poor cat's skull, it splits its one pupil into several pupils and crawls at them, trying to latch onto Nib's face, but they end up trapping it under a tray. Hermit finds Bergefeld and they try to clear a party of eccentric 1%ers wearing 18th century French aristocrat outfits with face paint and powdered wigs, the epitome of the Bourbon dynasty, and Marie, let them eat cake, Antoinette. Though she didn't say let them eat cake, she said let them eat bread, but you know, it was just dismissive either way. I don't really know what to make of this kind of party, but I would like to be on the guest list. The fact that they obsess over this particular era of history and culture, and the fact that they're partying so hard they didn't even realize a spaceship crashed into their building and that the building is on fire, I think it's just clearly a jab at how people in the 1% aren't really feeling the world's problems as much as the rest of us are. I just love how this scene is shot to show several shots of the oblong statue in the background, and then the scene distracts us with the sight of these goofy costumes so that when we next see Bergefeld with the statue behind him, we don't notice at first the additional shadow and bulk that has been added to the statue until it moves. You got us again, Xenomorph. R.I.P. Bergefeld. The Xenomorph uses its extendable lower jaw to puncture his face, and the way his limp body gets tossed around reminds me of the scene in John Carpenter's The Thing when Palmer gets revealed in the blood test, and at one point one of the guy's bodies just turns into a limp dummy and just gets tossed around. Kind of like this. Hermit is actually lucky to get Bergefeld's body pinning him because it covers him at first as the Xenomorph slaughters everyone else in this fancy party. We can't show too much of it, but it was pretty wild to see some of the women still frozen in their chairs. Indeed, Kirsch was right that no matter how rich or powerful some people become, we are all capable of becoming food. The Xenomorph then pounces on Hermit, but gets zapped by Morrow. I love the little zap among its metallic teeth. He bags the Xenomorph with a different mode of his gun. I think my favorite piece of technology on this series so far. A spray bag. Awesome. I love it. Actually, we get a close-up of his gun later in the elevator, and it looks like it's labeled an AL2M2. Kirsch sees the Teocellus screen, and we can actually read the creature's description. Tentacle system that can grow or retract at will. The tentacles carry extraordinary strength and are built to cling into and dislodge the eyes of other living organisms. Once replaced in the eye socket, Teocellus takes over the ocular pathways to the brain, overriding the neurotransmissions throughout the body. More study needed to gauge inherent intelligence, though Teocellus was shown remarkable problem-solving skills at near human measure. A complete surprise, species E4 has even given the tentative something. Meanwhile, Morrow is stopped by some Prodigy security right as the Xenomorph splits out of the bag, but after killing all the guards, the Xenomorph does not kill Morrow. Is this because Morrow is at this point more cyborg than human? Did he also have his adrenal gland removed and replaced by a cybernetic implant so that he is incapable of producing adrenaline and feeling fear so that he was kind of invisible to the Xenomorph? A lot of questions about how much of a cyborg Morrow is. Either way, this is the most aggressive I think we've ever seen one Xenomorph in any alien thing, at least in terms of kill count and how fast the Xenomorph kills people. I love it. She's feisty as shit and very good at her job. Toodles idiotically stares down the tendril of the flora-fauna pod, clearly more curious than scared. Meanwhile, Kirsch scans the Maginot computer to locate an area that has 6 Xenomorph eggs. So I assume that in addition to getting those loose face huggers, the Maginot crew maybe also got their hands on some eggs, or that loose Xenomorph might have created these eggs. The canon is not quite clear how Xenomorph eggs come about. Like 1986's Alien suggested you needed an alien queen to lay them, and that's what most of us believe at this point. But Ridley Scott's director's cut in the 1979 film suggested that eggs, or ovomorphs, could be made by any Xenomorph transitioning cocooned humans into these kind of eggs somehow. As Hermit lays passed out, he flashes back to a childhood memory of his father James, no Holly, strumming the guitar and singing that song again, Accentuate the Positive, the song we heard during Wendy's transition. So singing a classic movie show tune from 1944 also feels like a parallel to Ripley singing You Are My Lucky Star from 1952's Singing in the Rain in the final scene of the 1979 film. Hermit finds a vault where they have a signed baseball by Reggie Jackson from the 1977 World Series Game 6 Yankees versus Dodgers. We see young Joe sipping a beer and shaking his head from the bitterness. Like, why give a kid that young a beer? But Reggie Jackson got the nickname of Mr. October from his clutch hitting career with the Oakland Athletics and the Yankees. Joe sees this as what his father called proof that sometimes the world gives you a moment to shine as a hero. Hermit, Wendy, and Slightly go through an elevator, and we cut back to the elevator again to see the door opening, reminding us of the opening elevator in Aliens. These things know how to work elevators. Hermit realizes that Wendy has a consciousness of his sister Marcy. At first, he can't believe it, but he tests her with a series of questions. On Marcy's first day of daycare, when she showed up dirty and her lip was bleeding, what did she say? I am mad to them, which feels like Tina Fey quoting her daughter for the line in 30 Rock. I want to go to there.
I want to go to there.
And then on Christmas morning when she woke him up, what did she say then? I still don't think my big toe looks like my thumb. These two, plus the Face My Fury line, are enough to convince him. They find the egg room, and covering these eggs is a blue laser field through the mist. This comes from the 1979 film when the set designers used the same design for the barrier covering the eggs on the lower level of the derelict ship. They actually got this technology from The Who, yeah, the band, who is setting up laser tech for one of their shows on the soundstage right next door to Ridley Scott's production for Alien. Hermit breaks the barrier, and this alerts a Xenomorph xenomorph, which is why I think the xenomorph might have at least set up these eggs, or at least arranged them this way. The eggs start to ooze, which we know precedes their opening, but they don't have a chance. Hermit is tackled off the ledge and he falls. We end with this great line.
Stay safe. Guard the omelet.
Guard the omelet. In this sometimes silly series, how can you not love a final line like that? Comment down below with your thoughts on these first 2 episodes. And a special thanks to one of our YouTube members, Paulo Bianca, who supports us at the executive producer level. Follow me at EA Voss and subscribe to all the channels in the New Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.